Welcome to another Leadership at Work discussion. My name's Belinda and I'm here with Robert Reid, and today we're going to be having a discussion about the Thai cave rescue, arguably the good news story of 2018, and if not, the decade. So Robert, why did the Thai cave rescue capture our imagination?
Well, it captured our imagination, and it also captured the imagination of millions of people around the world, and for very good reason. Primarily, of course, it was just a great humanitarian story with a fantastic ending. But it had all the challenges, it had so much going for it. Certainly, the actual rescue itself, I don't know if how many people realise this, but there was over 10,000 people were involved in the rescue effort. From government officials through to volunteers on the ground handing out free food to the rescuers, plus loads of other people from various disciplines throughout the world. So there's over 10,000 people involved, but they were also from over 20 nations were involved, so it was an absolutely global effort.
Apart from the humanitarian perspective, we also saw some fantastic illustration of some leadership in this Thai cave rescue. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Certainly. What we've been able to look at once we've examined the whole story, and there's some terrific documentation about that, and as soon as you probably know it's going to become a film, we've found there's about 6 principles that organisations need to learn from, that if they put those principles into practice, then I think they would get some amazing results along the same lines as what happened in the Thai cave rescue story.
Well, that sounds like it's worthwhile having a look at. What would you say would be the first principle?
Okay, the first principle was the assessment of the current reality. As you know, in some of the books such as the Jim Collins' Good to Great book, they talk about facing the brutal reality. And there certainly was a brutal reality involved in this story. The reality was full of impossibilities in some ways. And so what the authorities did at the time, led by the Thai government but using resources from all over the world, was assess the reality. I suppose in organisational terms you would talk about doing a SWOT analysis. So they looked at what were the positives of the situation, what were the negatives, what were the challenges, what were the opportunities, what were the threats. And there was an enormous effort put in by disciplines from various disciplines from all over the world in assessing the reality of the current situation. As part of that first principle, there was an involvement of stakeholders, and organisations who succeed understand the needs. They need to understand the requirements of all of their stakeholders in assessing the current reality. So the stakeholders there were from various governments, from the Thai Navy SEALs, from dive experts around the world, from medical experts around the world, from people with great knowledge of caves and cave rescues. So the involvement of all stakeholders was probably an important part of that first principle.
And one that some organisations forget sometimes.
Yes.
So the first principle is really understanding the current situation.
Yes.
What's next?
Well, the second principle involved was really the creation of a united vision to bring together all of the parties involved and to work out what was needed to be achieved, what was the possibility, what are the possible outcomes and the likely odds of success. So quite a deal of assessment again taking place about what is possible to achieve and what are the ramifications and what are the challenges again for achieving that vision.
Fantastic. And everyone being clear on the same page.
Yes.
Fantastic. So we've got our current situation and our vision.
Yes.
The third principle.
Third principle is combining with the second one about the vision, is about a purpose. A uniting purpose, a single-minded focus from all of these people on all of the efforts coming together in a united front, and the single-minded purpose was to save 13 lives. And what more important unifying purpose can there be than that one?
Absolutely. So we've got our current situation, our vision of where we're going, and a focused and single-minded purpose.
Yeah.
What do we need next?
Well, I think this is where the leadership really comes in. And that leadership was about creating a culture that bound together people from various nationalities, from various disciplines, from all over the world, who had never met each other before, but needed to be united into a single purpose. Mm. And the culture that was created there by the leadership didn't make space for great egos. It didn't make space for great hierarchies. It was just a single-minded purpose that everybody was united in trying to achieve.
So getting all of those diverse people and skill base onto the same page.
Yes. The leadership was demonstrated at multiple levels too, right from the government of Thailand through to the experts in their various disciplines. But I think the most remarkable and most interesting leadership lesson came from the coach of the soccer players. And the situation that they found themselves in, I think it was 9 days before they were actually discovered by the rescuers. And the morale of those 12 kids and their coach points to an enormous gift of leadership displayed by the coach, because the demeanour and the morale of the young soccer players, when they hadn't been fed for 8 or 9 days, were in an impossible situation in a dark cave, everything, the degree of difficulty was amazing. And yet the morale and the demeanour of those kids when they were first approached by the rescuers was just fascinating to see, and it just indicates the level of leadership that was being displayed.
Great. And the importance of leadership in such a difficult situation.
Under incredibly difficult circumstances.
And now the fifth principle.
Well, the fifth principle encompasses two major activities. One is planning, and the second one is the execution of the planning. Mm-hmm. So the planning took over a week before any decisive action was taken, and the planning was incredibly thorough, again involving people from various disciplines, and the planning was rehearsed, and the preparation that was put in place was of astounding proportions. The planning then, when the time was appropriate, turned into action, because they had to take action. The monsoons were coming. They only had another 24, 48 hours maximum in order to be able to execute the plan. As well as the other difficulties, the oxygen levels were falling badly in the cave where the kids were. So there was need for decisive action. And once that action started, everybody knew what their role was. Mm-hmm. Everybody was clearly understanding what exactly their role was. That had been rehearsed, and under enormous degrees of difficulty, the effective execution took place. And as we now know, all 13 people in the cave were rescued. And that was an amazing result, considering the people who are involved in the rescue have since made a similar statement, which was they didn't think it would be possible to rescue all 13.
So a fantastic result. The action that was required was not rushed, so it had that planning time was the key point there.
Very much so. But once the action was to be taken, then it was all hands on deck, and everybody knew exactly what their role and their contribution was.
Right. And our final principle.
The final principle has been reflections and review. So the reflection on what worked, the reflection on how the lessons learned from that cave rescue could be applied in many other rescue situations. So there's been an enormous amount of work done documenting the procedure and the processes that went by, so that if there were similar events, not necessarily underwater cave rescues, but a whole range of different rescue situations, that the principles could be applied equally. And finally, part of that review and reflection process was the recognition and the rewards for the people involved. And on this occasion, not necessarily financial rewards at all, because all of the people involved were there on a voluntary basis, but certainly the recognition, and as you know, the two Australians involved in the event have been given the Australian of the Year awards, absolutely well deserved. But that recognition goes through all of the other rescuers from the US, from Great Britain, from China, from Thailand itself, and some of the other 15 or 20 nations involved have all recognised the efforts of all of the people involved.
And so important, isn't it? And a lesson that we forget in organisations sometimes is to recognise people when they've achieved something extraordinary.
It is something that's quite often overlooked, but a necessary part of the process. So there's the 6 principles involved that I think that organisations can take lessons from, and we'd be very happy to send a summary of those principles to anyone who would like to read more about it. And of course we would recommend strongly that the book written by James Massola would be worthwhile having a read of for people who are interested in it from a humanitarian point of view, but also from an organisational and leadership effectiveness point of view.
Fantastic. As always, for any more information on any of the leadership services provided by Leadership at Work, please visit us at our website, leadershipatwork.com.au, or email us for more information. Thank you.